somewhere in the middle. Jennifer, are we ready? All right, welcome. I will call the Salem Planning Commission for September 17th, 2024 to order. And I will look to Commissioner Bott for a motion. Please to amend the agenda.
I move to amend the agenda to add item 1.1, oaths of office for new commissioners.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Second for Commissioner Jewett. Are there any questions, any comments, any discussion? All right.
The new book can't. You're not. Sorry.
For the current commissioners, are there any questions, discussion? All right, hearing none, I will ask if Jennifer will call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bott.
Aye.
Commissioner. I'm sorry, do I call the new commissioners? Okay. All right, Commissioner Heller is absent. Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Commissioner Jewett.
Aye.
Commissioner Villarreal.
Aye.
Whitmore.
Motion passes. Oh, no. Yep, okay. We do that now? Yep, all right. You do my space? Yep, okay, perfect.
Space to. We do have. You need that. Oops. Okay, so if you can raise your right knee. Say, so I, Marissa Tav,
I, Marissa Tav,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America
and the state of Oregon,
and of the state of Oregon
the city charter and ordinances of the city of Salem,
and the city charter and ordinances of the city of Salem,
that I will, to the best of my ability,
that I will, to the best of my ability,
faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem
faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem
during my continuance there.
during my continuance therein.
Got this before I had it. Okay, so. I, Benjamin Frybeck. I, Benjamin Frybeck. Do solemnly swear or affirm. Solemnly swear or affirm. That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. And the state of Oregon. And the state of Oregon. And the city charter and ordinances. And the city charter and ordinances. Of the city of Salem. Of the city of Salem. That I will, to the best of my ability. That I will, to the best of my ability. Faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem. Faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem. During my continuance therein. During my continuance therein. It did camera that's everybody right now. Okay. I, Joaquin Lara Midkiff. Do solemnly swear or affirm. Solemnly swear or affirm. That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. And of the state of Oregon. And the city charter and ordinances. City charter. Of the city of Salem. That I will, to the best of my ability. That I will, to the best of my ability. Faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem. Faithfully and lawfully perform the duties of planning commissioner for Salem. During my continuance there.
All right, well, welcome aboard. It's exciting to work with the full complement of commissioners. I hope that our new commissioners will inspire us with questions and insightful comments as we go along in the cases that we have ahead of us today and in the future. I think we're now at roll call. That's correct. All right, so I'm going to ask Jennifer if she would read the roll call, please.
Commissioner Todd? Here. Commissioner Fryback?
Here.
Commissioner Heller is absent. Commissioner Laura Midkiff?
Here.
Commissioner Rhodes? Here. Commissioner Slater?
Here.
Commissioner Ted?
Here.
Commissioner Truitt?
Here.
Commissioner Vera Rendell?
Here. And we have quorum. All right. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? Going once, going twice? All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Is that Commissioner Truitt?
I will motion to approve the minutes of August 20th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Second, Commissioner Pott. Is there any questions on the minutes? Any discussion, need for revisions? All right, again, Jennifer, if you could please call the roll.
Commissioner Todd?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryback?
Aye.
Commissioner Laura Midkiff?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes? Aye. Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Ted? Aye. Commissioner Truitt?
Aye.
Commissioner Vera Rendell?
Aye. All right, motion passes. I will say that I've never been in a room where I was in the middle of the alphabet. That's kind of exciting. It's the first time. So thank you, all of you post S days. All right, we don't have a resolution, we don't have action items, so we're now going to go to a public hearing, which is on a conditional use Class 3 site plan review. I'm going to ask Jennifer if she can read the criteria, please.
This is a public hearing to consider the appeal of the planning administrator's decision to approve case number CU SPR 24 relocated at 870 Alameda Street Southeast. The criteria applicable to this hearing are listed in the Salem Revised Code under chapters 240.005G, conditional use permit, and 220.005 F3 Class 3 site plan review. The failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the planning commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The planning commission will then either continue the public hearing or for at least 7 days.
All right, thank you. The floor is yours, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Jacob Brown, and I'm here to present appeal of a conditional use in Class 3 site plan review located at 870 Almeda Street Southeast. The case number is CU SPR 24-02. At this time, I would like to enter this presentation, the staff report with attachments and testimonies into the record that were provided following the receipt of staff report. The applicant has requested a conditional use permit to allow an adult daycare center within the single-family residential zone, RS for short. There's also a consolidated application for a Class 3 site plan review, which is required to establish the use at the site. The subject property is located within the southeast portion of Salem. It is currently developed with a 1,714 square foot residence. It is abutted by the designated local street, Almeda Street Southeast. To the east is Sunnyside Road, which is also a minor arterial. Here's an overall aerial of the site, showing Almeda Street and then Normal Avenue Southeast, which is also another local street. Almeda Street Southeast runs along with that. That's currently one of this location for the project. As discussed, the current zoning of the property is single-family residential with a Salem area comprehensive plan designation being single-family residential. The adjoining properties are also zoned single-family residential. Sure. For context of the site, the residence is located on an interior lot with an approximate size of 8,276 square feet. The existing residence is an estimated 1,714 square feet. The driveway serving the property connects onto Albany Street Southeast and contains an attached two-car garage. The following photos here are some street view images on the site. This one is facing head-on into the property. Here is a west-facing view moving up Albany Street. And then moving from the east-facing portion of Albany Street, the subject property located in the top right. As proposed by the applicant, the entirety of the residence will be used for the adult daycare center with no exterior modifications or additions proposed besides the installation of required bicycle racks. As conditioned, the use is limited to 16 clientele and an 8-hour operation between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. with no overnight stay permitted. The applicant has indicated that shuttles will be used to drop off and pick up clients, with two to three employees being on site. And it's also conditioned that the applicant is required to provide off-street parking for those employees in the form of the garage and the driveway. For the site plan review criteria for specifically a class 3 site plan review is required, the class 3 site plan review is required to establish the new adult daycare center use. The use is allowed in the RS zone with a conditional use permit. No other development is proposed to the existing buildings or vehicle use areas. And the site conforms with all applicable standards of the RS zone and other development standards of the SRC, San Luis County. Regarding the conditional use criteria, the use is a conditional use in the RS zone and is identified by the hearings officer, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the adult daycare center on the surrounding properties and areas will be minimized through the proposed conditions. The most consistent concern about the impacts on livability that was provided prior to the hearings officer's decision was centered on the vehicular and pedestrian safety from traffic generated by the proposed use, which the hearing officer addresses to the imposition of conditions to stagger the arrival of shuttles to 2 vehicles every 10 minutes, and requiring the applicant to instruct shuttles to pick up and drop off clients in the driveway or in front of the subject property when necessary, in a manner that doesn't hinder traffic along Albany Street. In regards to compatibility with surrounding properties, the applicant has indicated that the original, within the original proposal, that the proposed adult daycare center will operate during weekdays for 5 hours a day with 2 to 3 employees at the site. A condition of the hearings officer's decision reduced the proposed amount of clients from 18 to 16 clients, and the exterior of the residence is not proposed to be modified as reserved the exterior residential appearance. Public comments were received during the original hearing with no comments submitted by the property's neighborhood association, South Gateway Neighborhood Association. The comments were addressed that were provided during the original decision, were addressed within the staff report's findings and also the hearings officer's decision. A summary of the comments are addressed within the staff report and the hearings officer's decision. And on July 25th, 2024, a timely appeal was received to the hearings officer's decision. Within the appellant's appeal letter, the appellants outlined 3 objections to the hearings officer's decision. The first is that the hearings officer's conditions do not minimize the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the proposed use. Specifically, that the increased traffic and congestion cited by the comments provided during the conditional use process would not be mitigated by the imposition of the hearings officer's conditions. That the proposed conditional use violates SRC 240.005(3)D, and as the use is not reasonably compatible with the surrounding property, and it will have more than an impact on the livability for the surrounding residents. Lastly, the proposed conditional use violates SR 240.001 by authorizing use that is not similar to the surrounding area. The hearings officer approved the conditional use in class 3 site plan review with the following conditions. Conditions 3, 4, and 5 were intended to limit the number of vehicles arriving at the subject property within a certain amount of time and require the applicant to direct shuttle transport to the driveway along the street frontage of the property when necessary. The hearings officer identifies that the arrival of multiple shuttles at the same time as a worst case scenario, which these conditions were intended to prevent. Furthermore, the facility staff are conditioned to park their vehicles within the driveway and garage as to remove the impact to any on-street available parking. The appellant letter asserts that the 10-minute stagger period is not sufficient and states that it would compress traffic within a 60 to 80-minute period, further exacerbating the traffic issue. The appellant provided a series conditions. The appellant provided a series conditions to limit the use to 5 persons and limit the arrival of shuttles to 1 every 30 minutes. The appeal letter does not provide a basis for this just a 30-minute period that would be required to load and unload a client from the shuttle. And as stated within the appeal staff report, the appeal letter does not provide a basis for this just 30-minute that would be required to load and unload a client from the shuttle. The intent of the condition 10-minute period is to require the applicant to stagger the arrival of shuttles to no more than 2 vehicles within a reasonable amount of time. Requiring the applicant to stagger the arrival of 1 shuttle to every 30 minutes is excessive and will limit the operation of the use to 16 vehicles to arrive within the conditioned operational hours, totaling an 8-hour period. Regarding the remaining objections, as stated within the hearings officer's decision, there are other uses within the single-family residential zone which are outright permitted that have been deemed appropriate for the livability or appropriate development of the surrounding property. The RS zone allows a range of residential uses, which include middle housing, cottage cluster, and adult and daycare, child daycare homes. A child daycare home is allowed outright in the zone without a conditional use permit. It will allow up to 16 children to be at the facility at any point in time, which is a similar traffic demand, which would be generated without the imposition of these conditions imposed by the hearings officer. The last objection identifies conflict with SRC 240.001. Which identifies this specific section of code identifies the purpose of the conditional use permit chapter and is not an approval criteria for a conditional use permit. Planning staff recommends that planning commission affirms the hearings officer's decision. That concludes my staff.
Thank you, Jacob. That was a very crisp presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, do we have questions from the commissioners? Mr. Drew, thank you.
Pretty simple question. Is the garage area included in the square footage of the house?
From what the county assessors for the area of the house is other than storage.
Okay. Do we know the approximate size of the living area?
I do not have the approximate size of living area. But maybe the application.
Okay.
Do you know if this is intended to be a licensed facility?
The applicant has indicated that this will be a state licensed facility.
Any other questions? I have 2 questions then. The first question is whether or not the commission can take into account questions around traffic congestion or parking as a criteria for making our decision. And I don't know who wants to take that answer.
Yeah, so you can definitely consider traffic impacts. They're, I guess, probably the 2 conditional use approval criteria: the reasonably likely adverse impacts being minimized, or the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impacts on the livability of surrounding property. So I think traffic impacts would come up.
Great, thank you. The second question is, if we go ahead and approve this application, can the applicant come back later then and change the configuration of the housing, increase the density of the housing, make other changes that would just go through a regular approval process and not an additional review process? I guess where I'm going with that is if we allow this, then all of a sudden, could the applicant then go and expand into a 4-plex or something that's different than the stated use without any sort of review process?
So the applicant is going to be required to do a change of occupancy to establish the use of the building. And that's likewise with the kind of additional use that we propose thereafter. So for family use would require change of occupancy, while they're doing would be a building permit specifically.
And would that go through like a public review process, a discretionary hearing process, or would that just go through?
Those uses are listed as a conditional use, and that's what civil process.
And would not go.
Would not go through.
Okay, thank you very much. That was my question. Any other questions before we let Jacob go? All right, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
I see in the staff report, it mentions, other, yes, delivery or vehicles such as private mail services, garbage disposal, and occasional van, wheelchair lifts. As well as commercial landscaping and gardening. I'm wondering if, school buses and school transportation has been considered in this as well, because if we're talking about peak hours, I know when I drop my kids off at Crosslord, it's a zoo of school buses and school zones.
I believe the section that you're referencing within the hearings officer's decision is referencing similar traffic impacts or similar size of vehicles that would be transported to that area. So school buses most likely would be transported to that area, but I don't have a outline map of the Salem Classic Transit District.
Last question, but we'll have one more. Commissioner Freilich.
Yeah, I noticed in the staff report, it reads that 2 vehicles are allowed to arrive or depart within the same 10-minute period. Are these vehicles carrying more than one client?
The assumption that's being made at this current moment in time is that the applicant is shuttling one clientele at a time within those shuttles. They have indicated that they'll be using the vehicles which are contracted by Cherry Lifts, specifically Cherry Lifts being under Sherritt's transit group. So it's unclear whether they would be shuttling multiple clients at any point in time. But at this time, we're assuming that each client is being arrived separately. To get worst case scenario of the traffic.
Then I kind of follow up question on that, because Cherry has been contacted about this, like, do they have an estimate on how long it would take to upload somebody? I'm sure they've done this before at other locations.
So the application was referred out to applicable departments and agencies, so Cherry is going to provide comment during that moment in time. So they can provide any information at least directly to staff, whether the applicant has contacted Cherry separately, and identify that information. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further, Commissioner Pott?
One of the, I think in the conditions, it was limited to 16 participants in the program. Was that number offered by the applicant, or is that a condition imposed by the city?
So during the rebuttal period, following the hearing, so the hearings officer left open the record open for 7 days, and then and then another 7 days was to allow people to provide rebuttal to that, and then the applicant provides final rebuttal following that period, which is another 7 days. During that last 7 days, the applicant did identify that they would reduce down their number of clients to, I believe, 16 persons in total, including employees. And I believe the hearings officer was identifying, trying to find equivalency between the child daycare, which is allowed up to 16 children at any time of clients.
Okay, so that was an applicant provided number.
The applicant indicated during the rebuttal, 16 persons.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner True, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Thank you. What is the anticipated number of occupants at any given time? So we're allowing up to 16, but is that number expected to be consistent throughout the day?
The specific operation of the adult daycare will be flux, but the applicant may be able to clarify exactly how the operation of that adult daycare. So
got a lot of questions today. Are there any planned improvements for the facility, such as ADA accommodations or assistance of a nature that may not be standardly built into a house?
So again, the occupancy, the applicant will need to seek a occupancy permit with building and safety. And building and safety will identify if the improvements that may be conducted on the site, specifically to meet the proposed use of that.
Thank you. Those were good questions, but that raises one for me. So I'm confused now if it's 16 clients plus staff, or is it 16 total individuals?
At this time, as conditioned, the hearings officer identified 16 clients total with the applicant indicating 2 to 3.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Vieira Brandel.
There was one part saying that the applicant is not licensed to handle the severely disabled, so that the use of a van with handicap lifts will be infrequent. Is there anything, could the applicant just change that immediately after they get the approval, and then all 16 people could be coming in with handicap lifts on the vans? Or is there any expectation that the sort of way that they're operating isn't going to change?
So per the conditions of approval, the applicant is required to be limited to 2 shuttles at any time. The form of those shuttles are not clearly identified as this part. However, during testimony provided by the applicant, it was unclear what level of flights will be provided for, but they did identify specifically. So it's unclear this time what's been provided to staff.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but what experience does the applicant have providing direct services at this time? I know they're not licensed yet, but do they have to provide direct services to?
I don't have that information on hand. Whether this applicant has conducted this kind of facility in the past, but they will be required to meet state guidelines specifically.
I noticed in the trip generation letter from DKS, it states that based on the city staff report, and then they list a few bullets which they base their trip generation in table 2. It says only one client may arrive and depart for 10-minute period. But condition 3 reads that 2 vehicles are allowed to arrive or depart within the same 10-minute period. Is that a mistake? Is there a reason why DKS only assumed that one client would be arriving and departing instead of 2?
The applicant could probably clarify exactly what was provided to their consultant for the traffic generation report that they provided. That report was provided today. If you have any questions about specifically the traffic generation, we did that totally on the basis of city traffic. To provide clarification on what's city staff needs to determine.
Would you like to ask Mr. Martin a question?
Yes, I would. Is that asking the same question?
So I received this today, just like you. I looked at it for a few minutes. I don't know what the conditions said, so I can't really speak to them. I'm looking at the 10-minute period, 6 trips, 12 vehicles. That's like 1 every 5 minutes. Shuttles that are ADA accessible. It takes a few minutes to if somebody's in a wheelchair, it takes a few minutes to get them unloaded, get the lift down, get them into the facility, buckle everything up and leave. On the return trip, they pull up, they come out, they get on, they get loaded, they lock them down, and they remove them. So yeah, every 5 minutes doesn't seem unreasonable. 12 trips over an hour, it's 1 every 5 minutes. And a trip in, trip out, that's 2 trips.
Thank you. All right, why don't we move on to the applicant now? Record your statement.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to share. Oh, here, the big green button. Hey, good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Brittany Randall. I'm the owner and principal planner of Brand Land Use. For your record, we are located at 1720 Liberty Street Southeast in Salem, Ward 2. I heard a couple questions that were good ones, so before I dive into my presentation, I will try to clarify those. The square footage of the building is approximately 1,700 square feet, and that is exclusive of a 552 square foot garage. The applicant contacted Chariots to do what they called a dry run, just to see if the lift bus could come and safely accommodate people at this location, given topography and all of that, but there was no passenger, there was no, attempt with a passenger. So it was just the van that came, they set the lift down, they determined that they can provide services to this location, and then they. So hopefully that provides some good clarification for you. Okay, a lot of my presentation is going to copy what Jacob has already told you, so I hope that you'll try your best not to yawn and fall asleep on me. Also, welcome new commissioners to an appeal. Have fun. Okay, so there are 3 approval criteria for a conditional use permit, and I'm going to walk through each one, demonstrating how our proposal meets them. So criterion 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone pursuant to table 511-1 under use and limitations and qualifications. Daycare, specifically an adult daycare center, is allowed within the RS single family residential zone with a conditional use permit. So therefore this criterion is met. I wanted to take it a little bit further because there was some confusion in the previous record between an adult daycare home and an adult daycare center. An adult daycare home is an outright permitted use in a zone, meaning a conditional use permit would not be required. An adult daycare home is defined as daycare for 5 or fewer adults provided in the home of the adult daycare provider, meaning the provider would live at the residence. The applicant is seeking to establish an adult daycare center at this location, which requires this conditional use permit. An adult daycare center is defined as a daycare center for adults in a non-residential structure. The consolidated class 3 site plan review will change the use of the structure from residential to an educational use because no one resides within the structure. It meets the definition of an adult daycare center upon approval of the condition or class 3 site plan review. Criterion 2 is the reasonably likely adverse impact of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And I believe this to be the criteria why we all get to meet this evening. So I'll take the most time on this one. We believe we've deduced the 3 main concerns to the following issues. The first, to the existing condition of Albina Street, which turns into Norma Avenue, doesn't support the use. And to that, we would provide Albina Street Southeast is classified as a local street in the Salem Transportation System Plan. Albina Street has an existing 34-foot wide improvement within a 60-foot right-of-way. So the existing condition of Albina Street exceeds the standard for a local street according to SRC Chapter 803.025. The previous record included a supplemental staff report which stated Albina Street Southeast extends to the east until it meets Sunnyside Road, which is classified as an arterial street according to the Salem Transportation System Plan. Arterial streets are intended to accommodate large volumes of traffic. Users of the adult daycare center are likely to travel from a higher classification street to access the site rather than navigating through the neighborhood streets. We believe the record reflects that Albina Street Southeast is more than adequate to serve the existing residential uses harmoniously with the proposed adult daycare center. The second issue, the increased traffic trips generated by the proposed use. While the city's traffic engineer has proposed extensive evidence into the record demonstrating no adverse impacts to traffic will arise from the operation of the adult daycare center, the applicant does hold the burden of proof. So to meet that burden, the applicant hired a transportation engineer to assist with demonstrating the proposed use will not adversely impact the existing street network to be utilized by the adult daycare center. The conclusion of the stamped and signed report states the following. The number of vehicle trips generated by the proposed use with the conditions of approval during the weekday AM peak hour and PM peak hour is essentially the same as the vehicle trip generation that was calculated using the data from the ITE trip generation manual. The number of vehicle trips per day that would be added to Alpena Street Southeast would be 64 vehicle trips and 12 vehicle trips during the AM and PM peak hours. This is a very small number of vehicle trips, even for a local street. Based on the trip generation results shown in this letter, the proposed land use will not create an adverse impact on Alpena Street Southeast or any other nearby streets. And as you know, the report in its entirety has been submitted to the record and should be in your packet. The third issue is vehicles walking the street during drop off and pickup. And to that, we would provide Alpena Street Southeast is fully developed to local street standards and exceeds the minimum improvement width by 4 feet. The local street standards include parallel on-street parking on both sides. Additionally, on-street parking is a known traffic calming measure. The hearings officer decision included conditions which will directly mitigate all of these concerns. This is the subject property at 870 Alpena Street Southeast. And this view demonstrates a driveway of adequate width and depth and available on-street parking, which can accommodate the loading needs of the use. This view demonstrates an abundance of on-street parking options and available maneuverability space for vehicles to pass someone pulled over for loading. And our subject site is identified by the pink star. This is another view that shows the on-street parking options, additional roadway width, and ability to see around this curve, which is also part of the neighboring concern. This is a zoomed out version of what Jacob had showed you in his presentation. And what we wanted to demonstrate here is that the site is located in an area with a robust street network already in place to serve the proposed use. So we believe that each of these concerns are mitigated through the imposition of the hearings officer conditions, specifically 3, 4, and 5. Condition 3 reads that clients shall be scheduled so that no more than 2 vehicles are allowed to arrive or depart within the same 10-minute period. Condition 4 reads, facility staff must park their cars in the garage or in the driveway while preserving at least 1 parking space in the driveway for a client drop-off or pickup. And condition 5 reads, the applicant will advise all client transport services to try and park in the driveway if possible, or in front of or near the subject property if necessary, and never block access to a mailbox. Criterion 3 states that proposed use will be reasonably compatible with or have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. We believe these are mitigated through the imposition of conditions 1 and 2, which state condition 1, the number of applicants' clientele is limited to 16. And condition 2, the operation of the center shall be limited to a maximum of 8 hours between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. and no overnight stay is permitted. There will be no impact to the appropriate development of surrounding property as no development or alterations are proposed to the existing site. I should say no exterior alterations, because if there are ADA accommodations that are required by building and safety, those will be made under the building permit. And I can answer your questions.
Thank you. We have questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Fox.
Before we do that, do we need to do that starting?
Once again, thank you. All right, should we stop just right now? Okay, So, are there any commissioners who have had an ex parte conversation or have a conflict of interest that they need to reveal?
So I wouldn't say it's necessarily conflict of interest, but I am working with Brand Land Use on a completely separate project, but just wanted that.
Great, thank you. Any concerns? Oh, yeah, Commissioner. All right, thank you. Anyone? Okay,
I did have a question, but I wanted
Perfect.
that out first. So, okay. So if it's 16 clients, I'm thinking about the staff ratio that's required for adult day services like this. And I believe it's 1 per 6 for this type of facility. So has there been any consideration of simply reducing to 12? 16 already triggers a lot of other requirements for state guidelines. And, you know, it just might mitigate or kind of alleviate some of that pressure if you were to just reduce the number from 16 down to 12, for example, which would then require 2 staff. So now you have additional parking space as well.
Yeah, so thank you for your question. So in our final rebuttal that Jacob had alluded to, we had proposed some conditions of approval that were not adopted by the hearings officer. One of those conditions that we had proposed read, the operation shall be limited to 18 individuals at any given time within the 8 hours of operation. This number shall include both staff and clients being served. And of course, this would have revised the hearings officer's version, which he adopted, which limited to 16 clients. So that would go above, of course, the 18, because now we've got 3 individuals, which of course it's of your discretion to modify those conditions, but that was a condition that we had proposed originally.
So by clients, you're including staff in the client category?
We were including, we were saying 18 persons total, so that would have included staff and clients. In the current hearings officer condition, that is not the case.
Okay, these descriptive words matter from a parking and ratios standpoint, so it would be helpful if we can just be very clear about participants in the program, staff, and then those who are third party drop-off providers.
thank you. Thank you. Other questions, Commissioner Vaughn?
Not at the moment. Well, maybe since I have.
You had that look.
I'm looking at my notes. So you said that the garage square footage is included in the 1,700, or it's not?
It's not included.
Okay. This will be certainly handled through the state licensing process and their plan review, but it does feel like a very small space for that number of participants.
We've been in contact with someone from the state, and the site is limited to 18 clients based on the square footage.
Other questions from commissioners?
I just, I don't know if I can talk about the letter or the email that was sent, and just clarification on, they mentioned a fence on the front yard. Do you know what that's related to? I don't see anything on the plans.
Can you elaborate on the email that you're talking about?
The email was sent, I think, to us today, but it says that, in addition, the proposed fencing in the front yard would look institutional, not complementary to our single family residential neighborhood.
I think I can figure out where the confusion of additional fencing came from. We had proposed another condition that was not adopted by the hearings officer that stated the adult daycare center activities and operations, excluding the arrival and departure of individuals, shall be limited to inside the existing structure or within the fenced backyard, but no additional fencing is proposed. Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
I saw that there were 4 bicycle parking spaces included, but I didn't see them in the site plan. Do you know where those will be included?
inside the garage.
So we are assuming two in the garage and 2 in the driveway, or 4 in the driveway? What's the assumption?
We were going to put 4 in the garage.
4. Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Do we have anyone from the homeowners association, the neighborhood association here? There's an appellant, thank you. Are they speaking today?
Yeah, that's.
Mr. Evans. Over there, thank you. Mr. Evans, if you could state your name and address for the record, and we'll have 10 minutes.
I'm gonna do that.
Thank you.
Good evening, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Mike's not on.
So I'm Jim Edmonds, and we live just up the hill from this proposed center is located. I want to give a couple of statements just before we start, and I want to be pretty clear on my purpose of being here tonight. I'm here tonight as a resident of the local community to address this conditional use. I'm here voluntarily to speak in my personal capacity. I do not represent any entity, organization, group, nor am I in any official capacity. And in speaking tonight, I'm really here just on behalf of me and my spouse and Sally. I know that one of the things that I really want to stress in terms of look at what's taking place in this area are a couple of things that based upon what I understand the code to allow. And I want to be clear on this, I am not an expert in land use planning, nor am I an expert on the Salem Revised Code. I'm not an expert, I'm not speaking to you as an expert on anything related to the laws that might apply to this particular situation. The thing I do know though is that statewide land use planning, at least what developed over 50 years ago with Hector McPherson and Governor McCall, said that they wanted citizens to be active in deciding things like this related to land use and zoning. And one of the things I congratulate all the new commissioners on is that it's really important for citizens to be involved in this. And part of the purpose of statewide land use planning and what was developed many, many years ago is that it shouldn't just be policy and paid professionals who decide issues related to land use. It needs to be the local residents and people that are involved in actual use of a situation like this. If you read the material, and I don't know if they gave it to you or got all the prior submissions from all of the folks that live in this community, there's a lot of concern about how traffic is going to affect their ability to use this location. And a couple of things that I want to draw to your attention, I think part of that dovetails into the criteria that we're here to talk about. Two of those criteria relate to livability and then the effects on the community. And I'm not going to get into the specifics in terms of legally or based on the code what those mean, but we're going to talk about practically what's going on in this area for you to understand whether or not this should be a granted or permissible conditional use. a single family residential neighborhood. There's nothing like this remotely anywhere within this. And when you talk about what's going to be, what's proposed here, it is an adult daycare center. My understanding means it's not an adult daycare home. Adult daycare home, apparently is a definition that someone lives in the home, takes care of occupants in the home. This is an adult daycare center, which I've just been informed is more like what is over at the 55+ community off of Silverton Road. That's an adult daycare center. That's what's being proposed for this single family residence in a single family. So the issue really is, does that affect the community, and does it affect the people that live in this community? The roadway where 870 Alvena is located is unique, and I've pulled up this slide, but you can tell. And I'll give you this information, is that there's no dispute that the road has limited sight distance for vehicles and pedestrians. It creates a dangerous situation for drivers and folks that are on that road. And that's not just me saying that. This is what was in the hearings officer's report. It identified one of the findings that vehicles that drop off and pick up clients, it says primarily taxis, and I'll just note for the record, the hearings officer, I think, was told that it would be taxis that would be delivering people. Now, I think we hear it for the first time. It's my knowledge that it's going to be cherry lift, coming with buses to deliver folks to this house. The phrase that comes out of the hearings officer's report is that vehicles that drop off and pick up clients, primarily taxis, may be parked in a manner that would cause dangerous vision situations. Since the proposed adult care center is located near a bend in Alvena Street, adjacent to a steep slope of the road, the reduction in sight distance caused by a combination of the bend in the street, the adjacent hill, and the existing vegetation increase the chances of vehicle and pedestrian collisions. There also exists the potential blockage of the central mailbox structure, and the reduction in spaces on the street may significantly reduce the availability of visitor parking for short periods of time. That's from the hearings officer's record, findings that were made by the officer. The conclusion reached by the hearings officer in another part of the report is as follows. It was a statement: there is a high probability that delivery and departure of clients will cause hazardous parking situations, depending upon how many client vehicles will be buying for the parking spot at the time. And these are not my statements, they're right from what the hearings officer from the inside. That conclusion confirms that conclusion is confirmed by the numerous submissions by local residents who drive this road every day. And that's my wife and I drive this road every day. We live up on the hill, probably 6 or 8 houses up that road. This is the way we come to work, and we go to the grocery store, and we do everything that's involved in our daily lives, as do a number of other people who in the streets up further in the hill, Glendora, Norma, all those streets, they all use this as their access to get to Sunnyside. And so to look at this street then and try and say, okay, to create an adult daycare center in a house right on that blind corner creates some concern both for residents as well as just anyone who has to use that road on a regular basis. The proposed conditional use creates a significant safety livability concern for the persons using the roadway and the individuals who are moving to and from 870 Alvena. The conditions that have been attached to the proposed conditions unfortunately do not ameliorate or nor mitigate against these safety livability concerns. In fact, some of the conditions make the problem worse. First, there's nothing in the conditional use for the proposed conditions to prevent transport vehicles from parking in the street while loading, unloading. Statement was made earlier that the condition says that the applicant will direct individuals to park in the driveway. The actual condition says this. Condition 5 says the applicant will advise all client transport services to try to park in the driveway if possible, or in front of or near the subject property if necessary, and never block access to a mailbox. I submit to you, I think that's an unenforceable condition. It creates no condition to require anybody to park anywhere than logically on the street. To fulfill the condition, all the applicant needs to do is tell the drivers to try and park in the driveway. No one is required to park in the driveway, nor is there any way to hold anyone accountable for the parking. Condition is fulfilled merely by the applicant saying, I told them to park in the driveway, and the driver said I couldn't do it without any explanation for why it couldn't happen or any way for the city to enforce that condition. The result is it's an unenforceable condition. For that condition to have any meaning, it needs to say that all unloading or loading shall take place in the driveway. And if all loading or unloading took place in the driveway, that would take care of a significant part of the concern about where buses would be parking on this road. Where they park is probably right up there across from the driveway, which you can see is going to create a constriction in that corner. And it also, if there's vehicles parked along the road in that area, it narrows this supposedly 34-foot width down to maybe 10 or 15 feet. Question was asked about, well, what about school buses? We don't know the answer to that. What about other vehicles that need to use that for access? Garbage trucks, whoever. That's going to create a constriction on this side obstructed, narrow patch of road that in turn is going to create livability concerns and traffic concerns for the rest of people who use this street. I assume that after I get done speaking, the applicant or whoever will speak and respond. And I don't know what is going to be said regarding this condition. If the condition was not correctly stated earlier to say that it requires that people park in the driveway, it does not require people to park in the driveway. The expectation is already buses going to park in the street. If the applicant though is willing to adopt an enforceable condition saying that parking must be in the driveway, again, livability concerns can be mitigated. However, if the response is that not all the transport vehicles can use the driveway, or the driveway is too small, or some other response that suggests a different response from the planning commission, I think then there's a different analysis that needs to take place from this group. And I wanted I guess take it a little different direction. I'll come back to the answer as to what I think potentially we think about. But looking at this as a single family residence in 870 Alpena and turning it into an adult daycare center is not an approved use unless there's a conditional use permit granted. We don't just allow people to do this. They have to get approval from a body like this and from the planning.
Mr. Evans, your time is coming close to an end. Would you
I
like
didn't
to?
know I had time.
10 minutes. 10 minutes. I apologize. I apologize if I did not say it loudly enough when you came up. Do you want to take another minute?
The group, extended that time.
Would you like a few minutes to wrap up?
I'm surprised that the appellant doesn't have more time to speak.
I'm sorry, that's what we have.
Well, here's what I'm going to then put on the record, because I think the indication is I need to put everything on the record. I think that's a failure of due process if the appellant doesn't get an opportunity to explain everything that is in the record. I also think that I draw another distinction is that part of what took place earlier is that there's a statement that in the memo that went out, I believe, with the notice, or maybe it's the staff's recommendation. Just make this for the record again to note that it's part of the findings, but it indicates that the city council that reviewed appeal at a regularly scheduled meeting on July 22nd, 2024. I'll put on the record, my appeal was not filed until July 25th, 2024. Don't know how the city council could have reviewed this, made a determination on something that had not. Anyway, if that creates a problem with notice, then I would make that record as well. In terms of wrapping up, there's a number of conditions that I think don't apply, don't do anything in particular for this. I've got a number of things I would address with you on this. 2 vehicles every 10 minutes. Part of our appeal identifies that if you move elderly people, you don't move them in 5 minutes. It's more than that, it takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes for them to be safe. And then if they're going to be parking out in the street and asking these elderly people to shuttle across the street, cars are coming around that corner, potentially going up that hill, that's a safety concern that nobody in this community would want to have one of their elderly parents be involved in. That's one of the things that in addressing this in terms of what these conditions supposedly do, they don't mitigate the issue that's at hand.
Thank you. Before you step down, let me ask if we have questions from the commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner Tev.
Thank you for your time today. So my question is, does this area have a residential, like on-street parking permit system in place here? And if so, do you purchase one?
Not that I know of. It's, I mean, there's no, you could say that is there restricted parking in any way? Not that I know of.
That would be one way to have enforcement in the future.
Well, we require the city to go and put up signs and adopt a resolution. I think that would say that that's restricted parking.
There's a process.
It's kind of onerous for citizens to do that.
Are there other questions from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner True, please.
Thank you for your testimony. In your experience, sounds like you drive the Alvina multiple times a day. What is the condition of the house and occupancy been in recent memory?
Well, and I will tell you this, we've only lived in Seattle for 4 months. What I understood from my residents' submissions is that it was in significant disrepair, certainly some issues with that, and then it was fixed up at some point to adopt this process. But I'm sure some of these folks can speak to that issue much better than I can.
On all these photos, I don't see very many people parked along the street. Are there situations where there is a lack of street parking or quite a bit park on the street?
We were commenting just briefly, the photos were taken apparently when there's no parking. Almost every day when I come home from work, there's cars parked along there. There's often when I come around, at least this summer, when I come around that corner, there's a landscaper that parks just beyond that kind of bush on the right. And that usually creates some constriction. The other thing I note is that as people use this road, there's been this indication that it's a 34-foot width, which may be what a standard street is, I don't know. I don't know that that's a justification though, given the limited sight distance here to say that this is a permissible area for this kind of facility. When you're looking at the restriction on the sight distance, and then when people come around the corner, like you would expect, they don't necessarily drive right up against the curb on the far side. They round the corner like most people do. Maybe out a little bit from the curb. So it really turns the 34-foot width, if that's correct, into about a 10-foot, 12-foot kind of narrow chute that people come through. And so if you can think about putting a Chariot's lift bus on that corner, it's going to restrict them further.
So based on your concerns with the traffic, do you think that's something that could be mitigated simply with reducing the number of participants in the program? Or is there a, do you feel like the use completely is not something you would support, or is it simply a number of people being provided care to.
Well, I guess, on my personal view, I think if they park it off street, if they're all the parking has to be the driveway. And potentially you reduce the occupancy so that you are in a position where you're trying to force so many people into a relatively small location. One of the things I think that was stated that I'm not sure why it was stated this way, but the number from what I understood, the only thing I can determine by 16 shows that the request was for 18. There's a statement in the hearings officer's report that said the applicant indicated they needed 14 occupants to be for the profit. What I would suggest to you is profit should not trump safety and livability for people. And so if the effort is to expand the size of this in order to create profit, my hope is that we're not going to be something.
Any further questions? Commissioner Laura Midcoff.
You. And forgive me, I missed your name, Mr.
It's Jim Edwards.
I'm hard of hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll try to get a little hoarse voice.
So I'm new to the commission, new to the situation, don't feel strongly about a lot of things, don't have any categorical issues with really anything about this case. I actually serve on the board of chariots, represent West Salem downtown. In another capacity, I'm not speaking in that capacity, I'm no substitute for staff, for their recommendations or evaluations of the situation. But broadly speaking, when we're talking about these paratransit services, they're not buses. They're about 15-footer vans, basically. And I think my first reaction here with complaints, which I think are reasonable, are about concerns about traffic and safety and the safety of the folks who join the direct services are kind of top of mind as well, is that folks who are transit operators for paratransit are one, trained professionals who are exceptionally adept at their job, and the rates of motor incidences or traffic infractions are substantially lower when chariots is involved. Actually, one of the reasons I'm supposed to promote chariots in the community. And when we have these paratransit services, again, no substitute for the staff at chariots, they don't need an assessment. We always prioritize grouping folks together. So the multiple trips, if chariots is used, the multiple trips over 90-minute period seems actually unreasonable. I don't think that would happen. I think more likely than not, folks would come 2, 3, 4 at a time, and some substantial share of the 16 clientele would come at once, and folks who are trained professionals would help them out. If that were true, or something like that were true, forgive the long preamble, would that be something that neighbors would be more amenable to in practice? And they're probably, by the way, not park. I can't conceive of the time they would park opposite the house. They almost always and rarely park in front of the house. They're likely on the street. Now, the van is in the driveway. It seems unlikely. Is that something, scenario that we could do?
Yeah, I don't know the answer from neighbors because I don't speak on the shore neighbors. I can give you this information that I am somewhat familiar with the paratransit system too, because in our career we chariots. And I understand the idea of putting people together and picking them up, but I also know that they would never say they could get a 10-minute window to be able to pick people up, get them to the facility, and load them or unload them in that time. So I agree with you, there might be some ability to group folks. That's why we put in that the trip should be 1 every 30 minutes. Because if you're familiar with the paratransit groups, when we book a transit trip, they'll give you a window of about 30 minutes to an hour to say you need to be ready sometime in here. If you got an appointment at a certain time, you may have a window of about 30 to 20 minutes that we're going to hit. So the concern is that even by grouping people on the chariots, you still need to limit how many times that chariot bus could be in the area. 3 or 4 in a row, maybe once every hour, once every 2 hours, something like that. In order to make sure that you don't have, I mean, the concern would be, we have 3 buses waiting. The 4th one that is pulled up in front of the property is where they can be on that road. We're trying to get to work, we're school buses are trying to get to school. People are trying to get their kids to school. That's gonna be the mix. Maybe 1 bus every hour. That's gonna be 4 buses in 10 minutes.
Thank you. Any questions before we move on to members of the public?
If a loading zone were to be designated in front of that home with hours, you know, loading and unloading only during peak times, would that be something that could address your concerns about parking?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how the loading zone work, you know. I have some concerns just about, this is a single family residential area, and we're gonna create a commercial enterprise in the middle of an area like that. I think that causes me concern, because frankly, that's what this is. It's a business being into the middle of a residential area, and if we started to make loading zones, does that create a different environment for group homes, for people who just want to live their lives?
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the neighborhood association? If not, are there people from the neighborhood that would like to speak? Yes. Well, please identify yourself and your address, and you have 5 minutes. He's the appellant.
Dan Biegler, I live on 850 Elvina. And there's been a number of questions brought up that really you guys have not seen the true picture here. For one thing, they keep comparing it to the child daycare and the comings and goings. Child daycare is completely different. Parent pulls into a driveway, lets a kid out in 2 minutes, slams the door, says hi, bye, and gone. We contact Cherry Lift Bus people, and they will not pull into the driveway because they will not back up out of the driveway. They'll only go forward no matter what. We have pictures of the Cherry Lift Bus in front of this house, right there on the corner, with the lift down, blocks half the street. And if there's somebody parked there, all these pictures don't have any cars parked up. I have pictures on my phone. He has pictures that we sent him on the earlier ones with cars parked there, a trash truck trying to go through there. I have that on my phone here. I can pass it around if you want to see it. But there usually is cars parked all along. And the Cherry Lift Bus, when we talk to them, they pull up at the driveway. They lower the lift down with the person on it, let them out, lift it back up, and then they do not make U-turns or turn around. They have to drive all the way up the hill, all the way through the whole neighborhood, back around to get back out. Clear up into the school zone where the kids are trying to go to school and ride their bikes. We've got this big Chariot Lift Bus there, along with maybe a trash truck trying to come the other way. It becomes dangerous. And like Jim, is it? I'm sorry. Yeah. We've never met, but I know he's one of my neighbors. Like you said, this is not a commercial enterprise neighborhood. I built my house brand new in 1986. It was a nice neighborhood. At that time, of course, home values, it's a new neighborhood, houses are expensive. As neighborhoods grow older and you start getting a few rentals in there, properties like this become available because now they're cheaper. You don't see this stuff going into a new fancy neighborhood. You see it going into older neighborhoods, even though our neighborhood's a beautiful neighborhood, but some of the homes are a little bit older. And this house here that we're talking about, people that lived in it, when they lived there, it was fine. But when they moved out, they rented it to a bunch of people with a bunch of caregivers. The whole place went into shambles. It was just thrashed. And they were noisy, cars all up and down the street, their teenage kids were hot rodding around, burning rubber. And then they kicked them out so they could do this. And then they completely remodeled the whole thing. Well, this started a year ago. They gutted the house out, changed some of the interior. They've done a bunch of work to it, and it's beautiful on the outside and the inside. But it's a commercial business. It belongs in a commercial zone, not in a family dwelling neighborhood. Even the child daycares I disagree with, because right, this is a different off the path, but I'm retired now. And I had a child daycare on the old neighborhood behind me, right in my backyard back. I try to watch TV on a nice day like today with the doors open. This gal built the whole playground in the backyard. Little kids go out there, they're screaming and yelling, and God bless them, I love them, but I have to close all my doors so I can even watch TV, because I can't even watch TV because it's so loud. And this, she lets them in and out, go 4 or 5 times. She's got 2 dogs. Kids are yelling, the dogs are barking. So I don't even agree with them being in a neighborhood, but that's a whole other thing. But like I say, this is a commercial business and belongs out on a commercial street or someplace else, not in a family residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got any time left?
I don't know. You did 440, so very good.
Oh, all right. Oh, yeah. That was another thing too, I'm sorry. I got a couple minutes.
Well, no, you have about 20 seconds,
Oh,
but
20 seconds.
let me just see if we have.
She mentioned that park 4 cars in the garage. No way you can put 4 cars in the garage. The original plan show for their employees shows 2 cars in the garage and 2 cars in the back. With that scenario, everybody would have to park on the street. And can I pass this around, or you can pull it up? You have our original pictures?
Wait, just 1 second. I'm gonna ask the attorney that question. Do we have things in? Once past photos, I think we need that in the record, don't we?
That was provided in the previous,
They're in the record, okay.
So all of these people are gonna be able to look at these pictures that we sent in? Of the cars parked on the street instead of a naked street like that. Trash trucks trying to get through with 2 feet on each side. That's what I want them to see.
So before you step down,
Oh, yes.
do any of the commissioners have a question? We do.
Just a comment, you mentioned the 4 cars parked in the garage. I had the question about bicycle parking. And I believe, the applicant responded that 4 bicycle parking spaces would be provided in the garage.
For what?
Bicycle, like bikes.
Oh, was it 4 bicycles?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said 4 cars.
No worries.
Okay, because right now, the way it is, you can only get 1 car in that garage.
Thank you. I had that same question.
Oh, like that.
Thank you. Yes.
Any more questions?
Are there other members of the public that would like to speak? That's okay. As you can see, we're a little casual here. But do say your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm Roger Miller and I live at 858 Minot Street. And I'm very hard of hearing, so I missed a lot of the conversation. It's important parts of it. And I guess if I had thought about it, I had a photo to show you a different picture of the street further back, because it is a blank corner. That was emphasized as much as it should be. You can see a little bit of the stonework right there at the very right side. And it gets quite, I don't know if it's 5 feet or more if you come back, and it's higher and higher. And so when you're coming up the street, you can't even see the house. Oh, am I not close enough? Sorry. You can't see the house until you get up fairly far. I mean, and it's a blind curve, I guess is my point. And also coming down the hill too. Because this is a corner, very steep corner, and it is the grade, I think you can probably see the grade of the hill is pretty steep. And I don't have much more to add than that. I just wanted to point out that the safety concern because it's a blind corner. And the lawn service is a truck and a trailer. It's not just a vehicle. It's got a pretty long trailer behind it. And so they're coming around a blind corner. You got the landscaper or whatever there. And then you've got, all this issue with parking, delivering people on the other side of the street. I mean, it adds to makes it more of a dangerous situation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you step down, are there any questions? If not, thank you very much. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? I think if not, we now turn to the applicant for vote. Open for questions for staff. All right. Well, I have one for Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, does the Salem Planning Commission have the capacity to create a drop off and pickup zone?
So we could designate a loading zone. I'm not sure it would be much good, honestly. I mean, it's like you would put it in front of the unit, and that could be, that's where like someone was talking about the cherry lips. I know all the vans are accessible on the right side, so they will be coming down the hill. They won't be parking across to unload. They will. You know that. But I don't know if I should say some of my random thoughts. But you said they don't back out. Did you say that? Or?
They won't back up that way.
So
The
I'm sorry.
gentleman said that and that's correct.
Okay, that is correct. Okay. So for the van to pull in the driveway is really a moot point because they're gonna unload from. Yeah, we could create a loading zone. We could paint it yellow and put a sign that says loading zone, or just put up a sign that says loading zone.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions from the commissioners? Sorry. Okay, if not, then, sorry. Yeah, okay, yes. All right, so now we have a final rebuttal for the applicant, and then we'll close the public hearing, and the commission will deliberate.
Thank you. Again, for your record, Brittany Randall with Brand Land Use. So we would offer that the hearings officer report includes conditions to mitigate these adverse impacts. It's our understanding, which we've all concluded now, that the Chariots lift can't leave the public right of way. When we did our practice run, they kind of pulled up and took up the entrance, so the driveway apron. And then the lift came down, so they were maybe extended 7 or 8 feet into the street, but they were really tucked up against the driveway curb there. I wanted to clarify some things that I think were confusing. So what I had stated was that the faculty the facility staff must park their cars in the garage in the driveway according to the conditions that have been imposed by the hearings officer. So the condition, of course, it says, do your best with loading and unloading, but if the staff would be required to park on site, not in the public right of way. The driveway is 23 feet in width. So again, we would just be blocking the driveway for loading and unloading with the Chariots. And then we also wanted to offer that the Chariots lift service could be hired by anybody, and they are. They're hired by everyone throughout the city. And so we see them in our neighborhoods, regardless of this use being established. We see them, in harmony with school buses and garbage trucks and things like that. So I don't think that we've seen any evidence to say that this would be totally abnormal. And then I also wanted to just clarify, thank you, yes, I was talking about 4 bicycle parking spaces. There's no lift in the garage to stack the cars up. Bicycle parking would likely take place, wall-mounted bicycle racks so that vehicles could still utilize the garage. That's all I have.
All right, are there any questions? Yes, there are. Let's start, Commissioner Laura Didcock. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I will work.
I have an element question. Why was?
Well, the applicant owns this home, and as you heard from neighbors, it was in disarray when it was rented as residential use. So, the owner of the home will not be operating the, use. That will be hired to someone who's a professional. So she's not a licensed care provider or, daycare facility operator. She would hire that. And this is a way for her to be able to control more of the state of the property rather than renting it out. She loses some of her ability to do that.
I appreciate that. I received this packet this morning and I'm catching it for some reason.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner True.
Has the applicant used the home as their primary residence, or was this purchased purely as an investment?
Long ago, the applicant lived here. This was their primary residence. And after they left the residence, they rented it out. And that's when issues arose. Those people have vacated and now this use is proposed.
Do you have a follow-up? Maybe. We'll go down the line. Commissioner Pop.
Has an operator been identified yet?
Not to my knowledge. I think we need to get through this process first. It's been a little contentious, so we're not sure what the outcome will be.
Okay, I'm mostly asking because in working with operators of similar facilities myself professionally, they often have a lot of feedback and requirements that they would have for these properties, and just curious if we're getting into the weeds before they know that it's even a viable property for what they're proposing.
Yeah, we have been in discussion with the state. I don't know that an operator has been selected, but the state is very excited about this opportunity. And that actually brings me to one other point that I wanted to make today, which is that the Oregon revised statutes actually comment about how necessary these facilities are. And I don't know what I have on me. Here it is. So ORS 410.485 legislative findings says the legislative assembly finds that there is a need for the Department of Human Services to promote the availability of adult daycare services, and that flexibility in the combination of adult daycare with other community-based services gives individuals who would otherwise be placed in restricted care settings a greater variety of choices. So this is something that, the state of Oregon is interested in.
Thank you. Additional questions? Commissioner Vieira-Brindell.
So, to go back to the kind of main thing we've been talking about, I apologize if this has been clarified and I just didn't see it, but the original packet states that it would be expected infrequent use of vans with lifts, and then most of the discussion has been about vans with lifts. So what is the actual expectation for how many clients are going to be transported in vans with lifts versus, say, just like a sedan or other vehicles? Is it most in vans with lifts, like all chair lift, or what's the breakdown?
We haven't identified what clients would be served and what their physical abilities will be. So I think what we're trying to do is just offer like most impactful worst case scenario so that the conditions can be reflective of the mitigation for those. But I was not present at the first hearing where some of the statements made by the applicant on the record might have been further clarified through additional additions to the record. I would imagine that Chariot's lifts would be utilized really frequently in this situation, picking up from care homes or private residences and dropping off at this location. I think that our client used the word taxi on the record, and there may have been a language barrier for what a taxi meant. So I would just assume most impactful might be the Chariot lifts, and that might be the most utilized form of transportation.
Do you have a follow-up?
I don't have a follow-up, but I do have a different question.
Go right ahead.
It's also listed somewhere in here that clients will be there for 5 hours. I just don't know a lot about this. Where does that number come from?
I think that was also offered as mitigation, so each person that would come would be limited to a 5-hour block within the open hours that are permitted through the conditional use permit. But I think that's where that came from, was that it would be limited to 5-hour segment per client.
I'm unclear about that, if I can ask a follow-up to your question. So is that actually a standard? I didn't see that in the material, so.
There was some material or information about that in the hearings officer report. I also find it confusing, so it'd be awesome if conditions could be clarified in this setting.
That would seem to be good. Commissioner Truitt, do you have should come to a question? No. Are there, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, a little unclear on what the purpose of an adult daycare is. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so primarily, it's not for care, it's for daycare activities, so it would provide older adults with social activities, so the things you could assume that they would do are arts and crafts with each other, maybe be participating in a book club, playing games. So it really just offers an alternative to socialization for individuals who you generally find by themselves.
True.
So while I do not at all dispute the need for adult daycare facilities, I do have a big struggle with the highest and best use of this property in this location in a residential area where housing is such critical importance these days, as well as with such an abundance of available commercial and office space that is an outright permitted use for adult daycare centers. So I suppose my question is, has there been any vetting or evaluation or analysis of doing this in another location or zone that is a permitted use for the center?
That analysis has not been conducted by the part of the applicant, mostly because they own this property already. And it is permitted in the zone with a conditional use permit. And the other thing I would offer is, we're looking toward, these like climate friendly options. Well, the way to make that happen is to bring services to neighborhoods and have complete neighborhoods. So I think that it's compatible because it's allowed in the zone. And so what we need to look at is a code amendment if we don't think it's compatible.
Do we know where, I guess, generally speaking, where the clients will be coming from?
I don't think we have that data. No.
So I think it's safe to assume that a portion of them will not be from the local neighborhood or immediately adjacent to it. They could be from anywhere in town.
That's true.
Okay, thank you.
Any final questions? If not, thank you very much. And I think I adjourn the public hearing at this point. Is that right? Yes, all right. We'll close the public hearing and we'll go to deliberations. I guess I will look to Commissioner Fott for a motion.
All right.
You can vote however you would like, but yes, we need a motion to debate.
So I move to affirm the staff decision.
Okay, and can we get a second so we can have a conversation?
I will second.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Rhodes. All right. Commissioner Fott, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. So I think I would like to start just by saying I think it's really important that we do provide this type of service in neighborhoods. As the applicant alluded to, it is very important to have accessible and proximate services in neighborhoods all over the Salem area. And this is definitely a need, and I think it provides a very beneficial and positively impactful opportunity for elderly people who would otherwise maybe be alone. So I do think that's really, I do have a lot of concerns with the number of participants in this small of a space. And just generally speaking from the Oregon administrative rules around adult daycare services, the square footage requirements just on a per person basis are intended to be minimums. They are not necessarily intended to be the best practice approach for providing appropriate care spaces. And I think what I would like to see and explore commission is, can we reduce that number of participants allowed, so that would also mitigate the traffic concerns. It would hopefully have mitigating and effect on the safety, and ultimately provide higher quality of care for those who are at this location. So that would be my just initial take on it.
Thank you. Mr. True?
So I'm inclined not to vote in favor of this, not because I dispute the need or that certain conditions can be met for a conditional use. You know, reviewing this objectively from the vantage point of revised code, I think the case could be made for approval, but by adding the human layer and the more or less 10,000 foot view, I do have some concerns about it. Commissioner Fott had mentioned the square footage. I'm concerned that works out to about 107 square feet per person. And I can't speak to what those requirements are for the state, but that's pretty tight. Street access, parking, the buses, the shuttles, etc. I struggle with this, with the location and with a precedence of changing a single, adding the conditional use on a single family residence to an adult care facility. You know, being on the board, chair of the board at United Way, I've seen firsthand what senior housing can provide, and how beneficial and care for seniors is needed. I just don't believe this is necessarily the right place for it.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I actually share a lot of those same concerns. I mean, I would like to see more of these things, you know, local, small centers that provide services for seniors. I'd like to see more of them exist. I mean, I agree with the policy goal there. That obviously seems like a positive thing. I think we've heard a lot of testimony and exhibits from both the applicant and neighbors and the appellant regarding the traffic. And to me, it's actually just still very unclear about what the traffic impact will be. I just don't have a clear vision in my mind about how this is actually going to work without creating risks to people that buy. I live in a very high traffic area, and it is very frustrating to me to have to deal with that. And so I understand how some of those frustrations can exist here. And I just see this turning into something that can be very unsafe with that curve right there. The conditional use permit is a mechanism for us to look in areas where something could be okay, but isn't necessarily okay. That's why it's not a regulatory use. And just with the facts that I see in front of me here, I don't know that I think this specific spot is a good spot for it. I just think there are a lot of concerns about traffic that I just don't know that I think that applicants shown that it'll be good.
Mr. Laura Midcott.
We're getting there. And you can coach me right after. 14 is also fine, that's fine, I know what you mean. I think what you just concluded with is on the nose for me, I think. I want this to be successful, but it's the place and the space that I'm concerned. I believe that, you know, caring for older adults is a community value, there are community solutions, I think we can belong and be very successful in the community setting. I think there are a lot of outstanding questions around who providing services, what those services will look like. They're not going to specialize services, they're going to have to be socializing services, the square footage issue is a major concern for me in terms of the quality of the experience. There's no commitment to access to parks or to be able to recreate in any way. And the transit, the traffic concern is actually less for me, though I would say it's very real for neighbors. I believe very much in the value of transit, and we should become more accustomed to that, not less accustomed to that. We should embrace transit changes as opposed to the opposite. But the bottom line too is that a lot of folks are not going to qualify potentially for paratransit services, and so there are going to have to be other non-chariots potentially modes of transit. And I think in aggregate you would have to add qualifications and or whatever the language is such that it would make this particular picture unquote. Thank you, Commissioner Bud.
One thing I wanted to add is just to kind of qualify my thoughts around this. There is an adult daycare center near my neighborhood, close enough that I walk by it on almost a daily basis. And I will say it is immaculate and it's very quiet. If the professionals who are there doing drop-offs and pickups are very efficient, very highly capable individuals who are facilitating that process. So the traffic for me is less of a concern, particularly if we were to limit the number of participants in the program on a daily basis. So I think for me, I'm hesitant to outright say no, because I do think this is a really important service that should be provided in neighborhoods. I do think we should, if it's possible, explore lowering the number of people who can be there, maybe to 8. So a number that is still going to provide maybe from a business perspective, a viable business opportunity, but one that is more appropriate to the scale of this location.
Okay. Commissioner Tough.
Thank you. Found is Commissioner Found. Bot, excuse me. Thank you. My question for you, again, as I mentioned briefly in closing my opening statement, was that I could envision qualifications and things to add to this that I would be amenable to. The one that you mentioned in particular seemed unworkable only because the applicant said they needed 14 clients to be viable. Is that, am I not mistaken? Or am I mistaken? So the 8 figure would seem to be in a position that would be as mentioned, not possible. Yeah.
I think
Commissioner Truitt, I think is next. Do you want to hold a minute? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
Obviously I can't speak to their performance, so I'm not sure about that. Just generally speaking though, without an operator on board, we can also help them through that licensing process. And how they're going to meet not only the staffing ratios required, but simple things like fully accessible restrooms based on the number of people in the program. It is challenging to make a decision on this because there are just so many unknowns. But as a general concept, I guess I'm supportive of the concept, but I, like many of you, have a lot of concerns with this scale and location. Being on the curve is challenging, but I think those could be generally mitigated. That's just a lot of people for a small location in a residential area.
Commissioner Truitt.
Yeah, I will add to that. Planning Commission's job is to review and evaluate items of planning and zoning and land use, and not necessarily take into account the financial viability of a business. While I recognize that is a metric for an applicant, it's not necessarily in our purview. And if 16 is too many and 14 is the threshold for profitability, that's not necessarily in my scope of consideration for should we grant a conditional use. So that being said, what we heard tonight are opinions and perspectives of neighbors who could be negatively impacted, and in some cases, a worst case scenario. And in our materials, there are several examples given about 5-hour sessions. They may or may not be spread out throughout the workday. This would be a worst case scenario that could result in very crowded and dangerous street conditions. Part of our scope also is to evaluate the best possible outcome and the worst possible outcome. And I try to prepare for the worst and expect or hope for the best. And that's not to say that the worst case scenario won't happen, but it's likely that it could, along with some very positive impacts as well. And so taking all that into account, I don't think that a worst case scenario based on what we've heard here today is out of the realm of possibilities.
Commissioner Rhodes.
I would agree with Commissioner Fott about the just livability of this. When I think about a daycare center in general, having that in a residential setting versus a commercial setting just gives a little bit more of a welcoming sense and a sense of place, especially when you're thinking of somebody who may not be able to access outside of that house unless they're going to the doctor's or a grocery store or something essential. This would give them an opportunity to go into somebody else's what feels like a home setting, and they're welcomed and just a little bit different sense of place. And so for that sense, I think this is actually a really appropriate setting. So
Other comments? Commissioner Ted?
Thank you. I am generally satisfied by the mitigations that I've heard. Stick my neck out a little in my first meeting, but yeah, I guess my philosophy is that the street parking is a public good and it's to be shared. And I'm a little disappointed in how unwelcoming neighbors are to this needed service. I heard the appellant not refer to himself as a neighbor, and I think that's an interesting philosophy. I did not hear from anyone who would benefit from this service besides the applicant. So as someone with older parents, I feel that need. I also live pretty close to the 50+ center, and I recognize that it's beloved to our community. And people are fighting really hard in the city for that center. And I think we've kind of underplayed the potential benefits to having this this kind of facility in the neighborhood. Given that the landscaping is already looking great, and that, yeah, I understand that change is hard and sharing parking is difficult when you're used to being in a place for a very long time and it having been a certain way. And though our city is growing quickly, and I think it's we need to make room for services like this in our neighborhoods.
Other comments? Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of echo what Commissioner Fott and Commissioner Ted said. I thought it was interesting that the original proposal for mitigation by the applicant was that there would be a total maximum of 18 people. That's including staff and clients. But then the conditions one that was included, I believe it was 16 total clients. And from what I understand is the amount of staff required would be at least 3, from what Commissioner Fott said. So, I mean, I believe that the parking and traffic impacts would be minimal at this location, but I would be interested in modifying condition one to read what the applicant originally had proposed is a maximum of 18 total people at the site.
Okay. Well, I'll share where I'm at on this. I'm very supportive of this proposal. For some of the reasons that people have mentioned, I think it's very important that we have these kind of services within neighborhoods. I think the idea that we send people away from their homes out to commercial centers or faraway places and that they're not integrated into our neighborhoods is problematic. I also think culturally, we're at a point where we are shifting from this idea of what a single family neighborhood is. I think the legislature has sent some clear signals on that to us. I also think that as we grow, we're just going to have to understand that we're moving from a more suburban to a more urban environment, and that's going to require greater negotiations in terms of sharing the street, in terms of noise, and I think we're just going to have to be a little bit more accepting of that over time. I think a 34-foot street width is certainly very appropriate size for people to negotiate around. I live on in a single family neighborhood with a large street, and as Commissioner Taylor said, it's a public good. When people park in front of my house, I know I kind of grit my teeth a little bit, and I have to tell myself that it's not my personal parking spot. It's maintained by the city, it's a public space, and I think we have to accept that. And I think also that it's very important that we have a place for our aging population to go that isn't an institution. And this offers that. So I'm going to vote in support of some version of this. I am going to make an amendment, though. I will offer an amendment. I think the points around the size and the volume certainly is very legitimate. As the Planning Commission, we have an obligation to put forward amendments if we can to reach approval on an application. That is part of our obligation to struggle through setting conditions that would allow us to vote for this. So I'm going to move that we limit the client population to 12. And so that would be my motion, and that we do not limit the amount of time that a client can stay at the facility. I think that's something that the operator can handle, given that they already have hours within which they're operating. So that's what I would propose as a way for us to move forward, is a motion to limit this to 12 clients.
I second that.
Second, Commissioner Fott. I don't know if I have anything more to add to that, but I'm happy to make something up if people have a question for me or hear your thoughts. Commissioner Lord Midkiff.
Thank you. May I just ask what the 12 figure?
Well, it was a proportional reduction based on the number of staff. So originally the company was 18, we need 3 staff. I brought it down to 12, that would require 2 staff. It cuts it by approximately a third of the volume. So to me, that was kind of a reasonable approach. But somewhat arbitrary. You can see that. Commissioner Fott.
I just have a question related to that. So say the applicant, after getting an operator on board and going through that approval process, if they needed to alter the building and increase the square footage, do they come back through and have to get a new conditional use permit, or is it kind of carried through the existing?
I think I asked that question earlier, but I'll at least
just based on those.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If once an operator is brought on board and they have done their evaluation of the building, if it turns out that they need to make alterations and it does change the footprint of the building, would they come back through for that conditional use permit to be reapproved?
Yeah, I think they would probably need a modification of the conditional use permit in addition to whatever building permits and site plan review they need. So that would go back to the hearings. It wouldn't necessarily come to the planning commission. Conditional use permit is just like in this case was reviewed by the hearings officer.
Other questions? If not, I think at this point I would call for a vote on the motion, on the amendment.
So just to be clear, so we originally had the motion from Counselor Fod, I think
Right.
it's now been amended, so what we're looking at now, just so everybody understands and I understand. So it's to approve,
I think we'd just like to vote on the amendment first.
whether to go for it, okay.
Okay, so we're just, at this point, we're voting to whether or not to amend it down to 12. And then we will go back to the underlying motion for the whole application. Does that make sense? So there'll be 2 votes, one to bring it down to 12 or not. And then whatever the output that is, then we'll vote on the actual application. Or other amendments, thank you. Not limited to just mine,
This is 12 clients.
12 clients.
With no maximum of 5 hours.
Correct, no maximum for how, other than the operating hours that a client needs. Commissioner Fogg, you have a question?
I'm just kind of thinking through 12 and does that still feel like too many people at this location? You know, this is all starting to be kind of arbitrary and, you know, I'm not the professional on this project. I'm planning commissioner reviewing the criteria presented. So I don't want to be cavalier with like how we approach that. It's just generally speaking, that's where a lot of my questions were coming with regard to the scale of this property and how many people are proposed to be spending the day there. And so I just wanted to maybe just clarify that 12 is not necessarily a magic number. Maybe it's 10 or, yeah.
Okay. So this, if Jennifer, you could call the roll. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, we have 2. Go ahead.
So just a general comment, you know, from a personal standpoint, I don't feel like that this single family home is enough to care for 12 adults at the same time. But that said, I don't feel like it is my role to determine that as a member of the planning commission. I believe the site itself could be suited to care for 12 adults, but I don't necessarily building would be. But as I said, I don't believe I'm making the decision on whether or not the building is suited for 12 adults. So I believe my concerns are addressed, the amendment.
Commissioner True.
Yeah, I more or less agree. I think that the entity that dictates or determines what the occupancy is should be probably not us and probably the licensing or oversight agency who handles that. Because I don't even know what number to pick. So there you go.
Well, as I understand, the licensing agency approved up to 18. So the standard that we're offering, or my proposal at least is 2/3 of what the standard is. So what's that? Let me go to Commissioner Rose and then back to Commissioner Bond.
Okay, so just as I'm kind of wrapping my head around this 16 number, that you could have 16 clientele, that does not mean that 16 people would be there at a given time. That's just saying you have 16 people that you're probably working within and, you know, depending on how much they use this service.
I'm understanding 16 as the maximum occupancy rate at any given time, not the total number of clients that could exist. So that's.
It would be helpful if the condition 1 then would have that wording, because it just says the number of applicants clientele is limited to 16. It doesn't say occupants.
All right, well, I have to look to either of our staff to see how we might word that so it's clear.
So you want it to be total, the clients and the staff?
The total number of clients occupying the space at one time would be some number that I think we're gonna find out here.
And you don't think the condition is worded right now covers that?
I mean, as I read it, it just says that their clientele is limited to 16. So that would be, in my mind, they could have 16 people that they are working with.
Even if they only come once a day. or once a week. Thank you, that's helpful. I'm looking to the applicant in her head, so. The applicant's representative,
And are you wanting to reword that?
I think we're gonna have to.
Jacob, do you have a potential condition? Well, you can't have another motion right now,
Okay,
amendment, so maybe you could vote on the 12 and either pass and say not, and Jacob and I will try to write a revised.
can I amend my
You want
motion?
it to be part of that. You want the condition to be part of the motion.
Okay, you know what? Let's go forward with this. So at this point, we're dealing with 12 clients. And Jennifer, if you could call the roll on that.
Commissioner
I'm
Fox,
just gonna let it go. Go ahead, please.
Commissioner Pop,
Nay.
Commissioner Pratt.
Nay.
Commissioner Laura Midkiff,
Nay.
Commissioner Rhodes. Nay. Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Heck. Nay. Commissioner Jewett,
Nay.
Commissioner Mayor
Nay.
All right, well, good thing this is a parliamentary democracy here. I've just lost my position. Okay, so is there another motion? So we're back to the underlying motion. Is there anyone that would like to amend the underlying motion?
At the risk of making an arbitrary call on this. I think that we should limit I don't think that we need to get into limitations on staffing. That is not appropriate for us to do. In general, this will go through a licensing process and there are very specific guidelines that have to be followed and it's not up to us to go through that process. That being said, I feel like limiting it to 10 participants in the program feels like an appropriate number. So I would move that we amend the condition 1 to read 10 participants. And
At any given time, or
uh,
can we deal with the clientele issue as well, that Commissioner Rhodes brought up?
well, again, that's an operator question, so I think it's at any given time in the, at the program, and that's ultimately that kind of detail is going to be, I expect, handled through their licensing process, not through planning commission.
If I understand correctly, the concern is that the condition read as a prohibition on the company from having more than a certain number of clientele, when we're really dealing with the number of people that are active in a building.
So as recommended as part of the initial staff improvements to the Finance officer project. We did recommend that the operation shall be limited to 18 adults. We could restructure that to the operation shall be limited to 12 clients within the structure.
For 10, I think the motion has 10.
With 10 or
Does that work for you, Commissioner Pond? Commissioner Rhodes, does that meet your concern?
I would prefer 12 just for kind of, I don't know much about this code, actually know nothing, unfortunately, but 12 it's one person per 6 people. 12 I feel like is the right number. Just I was more worried about the wording.
You had your chance. Okay, I'm sorry, it's getting done. Other questions of Commissioner Fott's motion for 10 adult client? Commissioner Fott, go ahead.
I had no idea we'd really be getting this deeply into the weeds, but I think, can we take, is there a pulse of the?
But yes,
I think that, I want to support this project on some level, so I would like to, if there's a way for us to find an appropriate number where the commission is comfortable to allow it to move forward in some capacity.
I mean, we could do a straw poll, but at this point, let's just vote and see how the outcome is, and that doesn't prohibit you from making a different motion or someone else making a motion, we're just dealing with the amendment at this point. Okay. So we'll do another, unless there's a question,
Then I'll leave my
we'll do
motion on
another
the table.
roll call vote on the amendment to limit the occupation to 10 adult clients. In the building. Jennifer, please.
Commissioner Pop,
Aye.
Commissioner Fryback,
Nay.
Commissioner Laura Midkiff,
Nay.
Commissioner Rhodes. Nay. Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Hebb. Nay. Commissioner Truitt,
Nay.
Commissioner Villarreal.
I'm sorry, I was thinking, what was the, it failed, okay, motion, the amendment to the motion failed. What would be useful at this point would be to hear from some of the nay votes, where they're at, as if you want to, the overall, the underlying motion should fail, or if there's a way that we can move forward on this. So,
I think I'm struggling, so, I agree personally, but I think, there were 16 folks, finds this is too much for that space. It's an open question to me whether it's my role, whether that's some other state or something. Commissioner Truitt expressed philosophy around, business and stuff like that. I disagree with him. I think it actually is our role to think about what is viable for folks, and it's not up to me to determine whether 14 is profitable, 13 isn't, 16 is, and I leave that up to, we can improve it, in other words, we can improve this at 16. If it doesn't work for licensing reasons, we can say, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work great. So I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't be kind of demanding this. And I would be in favor of saying 16 folks at any given time. And then let the cards fall within the interviews.
okay.
That's just my advice.
Thank you. I understand that the way I'm understanding the conversation is we're not kind of debating what's going to make this successful or not, but responding to the sides in terms of the traffic impact and the square footage. So that's kind of how I've been looking at this and trying to be responsive to some of the neighborhoods and needs in the community for this kind of service. Are there other members of the commission that would like to volunteer thought? Let's contribute.
Yeah, I guess, one of the conditions was limiting it to 8 hours of operation, right? And I wonder if, maybe this sounds counterintuitive, but opening up the hours of operation might be a way to alleviate sort of pinch points in traffic, so everyone's trying to show up at opening and closing times or whatever. If 5 hours is a normal time for this to operate, and again, it's unclear to me where that number came from, and I'd love to know if that's like a block of insurance billing hours, so you can expect 5 hours because that's who's gonna pay for it, and that's how that works, or if that's just a number that came from nowhere, I'd really love to know that. But if we open up the hours a little bit, maybe reducing the number of people and increasing the number of hours they can be there could create an equally viable opportunity that then alleviates some traffic concerns.
Absolutely. Let me ask staff a question if I can. I understood that the client was limited to 5 hours, but the hours of operation were longer than 5 hours. Okay, so the hours of operation are what?
So the hours of operation are to 8 total between 9 to 5 people, so we have wiggle room to work between those hours.
I think you misstated the hours of operation.
Or, but 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m.
7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So
To allow them wiggle room between the periods stated and maximum operational being hours total. Where the 5 hour number came from originally was from the applicant's original written statement when they submitted the application.
the shorter the period of stay, the more traffic you would actually generate. If you limited people to 2 or 3 hours, you just have more people coming in and out. Okay. So Commissioner Villarreal, I'm not quite sure where to take this anymore. Unless someone has an amendment, I guess we would move forward to a vote, or we could postpone. Do we have that ability? We need a little bit more time.
So you already closed the hearing,
Yeah,
I guess you could make a motion to reopen it.
Take more
Continue it if you feel like there's more information that you need. So there could be a substitute motion to deny it, and quite a few people talk about that. Could be other substitute motions to get Also, if there's a tie, then the hearings officer decision stands.
That's an interesting fact.
I don't get to keep going and say, oh, we tied, so now I'll propose my amendment. If the motion is to approve it and there's a tie, four yays and 4 nays, then it's the hearings officer decision stands as is.
So, and maybe this is not the best way to approach it, but maybe it'd be good to hear are we dealing with a fundamental objection to having this facility of any size in this neighborhood? Is that the fundamental issue, or is the issue kind of the configuration of the size and traffic? For me, it's what I'm hearing is the latter, that we can get there if we get the right numbers. And that what we're not dealing with is a fundamental objection, but by the majority, a fundamental objection to the nature of that operation in that space. So those are, one, if the majority is, we don't want that operation there, then it's dead and we should just vote that way. If it's, we want to mitigate the challenges, then we should continue to struggle with this and get there. So, Mr. Private.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm generally supportive of the use in this area. I am supportive of the 12 total on-site number, and also supportive of increasing the maximum length of stay to 8 hours. I think that would mitigate the concerns held by the neighbors. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
That sounded very much like the motion you voted against.
I voted against the number 10.
Okay. Mr. Fox.
I would also be supportive of going back to the original amendment of 12 and yeah.
Okay. Mr. Truitt, you want to offer any thoughts here?
This is feeling like a square peg in a round hole. There's just too many variables. We can't nail down numbers and times. I think that there are other agencies and organizations, licensing groups, the state, that is within their scope of work. I'm not prepared to vote on that because I don't know what those requirements are. And so it's, for me, it's just flat out no.
Thank you, that's helpful.
So I could make that motion and I could be shot down, that'd be fine, whatever suits everyone. I'm usually the guy who votes no anyway, so.
I think I think you're speaking to the underlying motion when that comes up.
To both of them.
Okay, all right.
You had me, Commissioner Truitt, and you lost me. So I agree that I think that instead of going no on the line motion, I think we should try to find a way to work this so that it can be successful if it's going to be. And I think it's not within our purview to make it successful or not, just to make it possible. And so for that reason, I would want to struggle more. Ultimately, vote yes on given that it's agreeing with you, Commissioner, that it's not within our purview to decide.
So the way I'm understanding it, we have a majority of folks that are interested in finding a way to put a senior daycare center in that location. We're just struggling with numbers. And here we're not talking about the numbers for their professional licensure or qualifications. We're dealing with what the numbers that we think make sense for that specific space, neighborhood, and street structure. And so to some extent, that is going to be completely arbitrary based on our own experiences in our own neighborhoods and what we heard from the population or the people that testified. So we talked about 12, we talked about 10. I heard actually some support going back to 16. Ms. Home, Commissioner Rhodes.
Well, I would support 16 if it's like limited to them having 16 clientele, like I brought up before, versus I would support 12 if that's at any given time, 12 clientele. So, but those are so many rules that we're putting on here that until they have an actual study done and go through the whole licensing process, we're just giving them a framework that may or may not actually apply. So it feels like I'm coming up, we're coming up with numbers that it might not stick.
That's true. And there's always Luba, and we'll see where this all goes. Unless we have, someone else would like to make a motion. I already made a motion for 12, and it was rejected, so I don't think I can make a motion for 12. But someone else would like to make a motion, that'd be good. Otherwise, we'll go to the underlying motion, which is the staff recommendation with the.
I will move to amend it to 12 clients at the location.
And just, Jane, would you read then back how that condition 1 would read as well?
So, for what we kind of discussed, the operation shall be limited to 12 clients within the structure. That'd be the condition.
I'm not gonna ask for any questions at this point. I'm gonna ask Jennifer to read the roll, please.
Just quick, let me ask, what are we doing with the 5 hour? Is that still it or not?
Oh, please, not right now.
So there's no specific condition restricting 5 hours. That's just what the applicant indicated initially.
But it's not binding.
It's not binding. It's
So
the conditions as written as 8 hours.
Jennifer, please.
Second.
Oh, we didn't get a second. Someone's gotta keep us honest.
Commissioner Pop,
Aye.
Commissioner Fryback.
Aye.
Commissioner Laura Midkiff,
Nay.
Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Todd. Aye. Commissioner Truitt,
Nay.
I think the motion passed. All right.
Commissioner Bureau.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Aye.
Now we're at the underlying motion. And Commissioner Brendel.
I would actually like to move to make another amendment. Because from my understanding of everything that we have gone over today, the concern about the impact on livability is not from the people in the house. When they're there, it's about the specific pickup and drop off times. And so I really think it would mitigate those concerns to open up the operating windows. So I guess I would move to eliminate the 8 hours of operation and just change the condition to be operating within the already established start and end times, which I believe were 7 to 6. And just say, so that the condition is that they cannot operate outside of the hours of 7 to 6, but they're not limited to 8 hours. The hope there being that that would spread pickup and drop offs across more time.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions? Well, I think we need a second before we have discussion.
Second.
All right, second, thank you, Commissioner. Any discussions or questions?
I think that's a reasonable idea. You know, there are certainly seniors that would, you know, prefer to sleep in, and say if they open the facility at 9, well, people that woke up at 5 in the morning are gonna show up right at 9. Whereas if you open the facility at 7 a.m., all the people that do want to sleep in are gonna come in later, as opposed to at the same time, people that woke up 4 hours prior are coming in. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I think that will be considered.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Please, Commissioner Rhodes.
I would say if the traffic study was based off of, I think, kind of that 8-hour window, so we're gonna be introducing more traffic. If you had the hour from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., you're gonna have multiple shifts. So anyways, it's just gonna alter that.
Commissioner Brendel, do you have a response?
I do think that is definitely true. We would, I mean, at least with the past, we're reducing the number of clients we're using for traffic too. So I think with the two motions together would be a net reduction. And in terms of total number of trips, I guess that seems less troubling to me than rush hour kind of affects synchronizing trips. So even if it added a few trips, if it spread them out over more time, that seems like a more mitigated circumstance.
And this is condition, what number? Condition 2? Thank you. So before we vote, Jacob, would you read it back to us?
So, with the amended condition or,
The amended, yeah, the proposed amendment.
as amended, the operation shall, center shall be limited to between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. And no overnight stays permitted.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a much more concise and eloquent way of stating motions when I say reads.
That's why they're there and we're here. Okay. Any further discussion on this before I call the roll? No, okay, Jennifer, please.
Commissioner Vaughn. Aye. Commissioner Fryback.
Aye.
Commissioner Lara Minkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Commissioner Todd. Aye. Commissioner Truitt.
Nay.
Commissioner Vera Brunel.
Aye.
Amendment, motion to the amendment passes. Are there any other matters we need to discuss on this before moving to a vote on the underlying motion? Thank God. Okay. So now we're going to be voting on the underlying motion and with the two amendments incorporated. So Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Vaughn. Aye. Commissioner Fryback.
Aye.
Commissioner Lara Minkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Commissioner Todd. Aye. Commissioner Truitt.
Nay.
Commissioner Vera Brunel.
Motion passes. All right, I'm going to call it 5-minute recess. back up and. Let's go right
Talk about, let's see, number two more lower end.
Fire safety.
Yes.
program.
Yeah, fire marshal.
Well, like a good conversation over a drink. Not here. I like beer a lot. Sorry. Supreme Court show. Okay, we're gonna call us back to order here. And looking at the agenda, we have special orders of business, but I don't think we have anything in that category. Just a reminder that you don't. Informational reports. All right. So this is what Tony has been waiting 3 hours to present. Thank you, Tony, for your patience.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Martin. I'm the Assistant City Traffic Engineer. For reference, I've been with the city of 20 years this December. Prior to that, I was with ODOT for 12.5 years. Doing development review, access management, came to the city and development services and moved over to the city traffic, assistant city traffic engineer. So I was asked to kind of give a little talk about transportation requirements for land use applications. And traffic never comes up as an issue anywhere ever. So I hope I've organized my thoughts for you. So city code gives us authorization to require traffic impact study. It's in code. And we require it when a proposed development generates 200 or more daily trips on a local street or 1,000 or more trips on a collector, arterial, or parkway. So that's when we require it. The purpose of the TIA is to ensure the development generating traffic mitigates their impacts to the transportation system. And it could be turn lanes, could be traffic signal, could be any number of things. The mitigation is usually on site, although sometimes it can be off site. We might need to, we do an analysis and the intersection is failing, so to mitigate your impacts, they have to build a right turn lane. Or they have to add a left turn, or they have to add a double left turn, which means you need 2 lanes to receive the 2 left turns on the other side. So when do we require it? How do we get there? We have a form, it's online, I'm not gonna pass it out. It's called the Trip Generation Estimate Form. The developer fills it out, it gets submitted to planning with class 2 and class 3 applications. They tell us what the address is, where their project is, what they're proposing, how big it is. And then it gets to me and I have I used to say I had this book called the ITE, which stands for International Transportation Engineers. It's called the Trip Generation Manual. It used to be a book. We're on the 11th edition, it's 4 books. It's 7.5 inches thick. It has all these different land uses and all the proposed developments. And so it gets to me, I fill it out and estimate their trips. And if there are over 1,000 trips on an arterial, we make a check, we need a TIA. TIA stands for Traffic Impact Analysis. I don't want to get ahead of it, but it's not the TIAs where you're having little mini strokes. It's not that. And so some of I made some notes about, well, what generates 1,000 daily trips? Well, a subdivision that has 106 homes on it is 1,000 trips. 149 apartments is 1,000 trips. So to kind of give you scale, 92,000 square feet of office is 1,000 trips. 27,778 square feet of medical office, because they have a lot more people coming to it. Fast food restaurants are big generators. 3,000 square foot fast food with a drive-through is 1,400 daily trips. So, a lot of turning vehicles. So then, how do we scope the study? You know, what does that look like? How far can we have them study? I got asked the other day, Tony, what are you doing to fix the traffic over on this street with all this new development? It's like, I can't require a traffic study that far away. We have limits of how far we can study, and in our streets design standards, it tells us how we scope the traffic study and what the limits are. And we can require an analysis of an intersection that has 50 new daily trips. So if you think about, the peak hour, or actually, I think it's 50 daily, no, it's 50 PM peak hour trips. Sorry. 50 trips in the PM peak hour. So that means some are coming and some are going. So I'll give you an example. A single family residence generates about 10 trips a day. That's one trip in, one trip out. You leave for work, you come home from work. You know, you have children, you go pick them up from soccer practice, you bring them back, about 10 trips a day. In the PM peak, there's one trip coming in. Usually it's the trip home. So in the, let's see, should have printed this bigger. So in our street design standards, it tells us what our operating, we've scoped the TIA, we've told the developer to hire a professional traffic engineer. You have to go out and count these intersections, and you have to tell us how they're operating. So what is our basis for operation? We have a thing called level of service and volume to capacity ratio. And level of service is a measure of delay. And it's a whole technical analysis tool. It's so complicated. I don't know the workings of it. You enter the data and you get the results. The other one is volume to capacity ratio. And that one is a little easier to understand, that a travel lane of traffic has a certain capacity of vehicles that it can handle in an hour. And then you have a volume of traffic, and so you calculate the ratio, the volume to the capacity. Our maximum volume to capacity that we would love to shoot for is 90%, 0.9. Many of our intersections in the city operate greater than 90% in the PM peak hour. You can pick a busy intersection, Market, Lancaster, Mission and 25th, which is a state highway, but there are a lot of intersections over capacity. And I don't know if this will help, but I use it as a kind of visualization tool, is that if you had a funnel and you're pouring water into it, the water's flowing through, so you have a capacity of that, and then you start adding volume, it starts backing up, and pretty soon it can spill over. That's what happens when you get over capacity. So you may have to wait more cycles to get through the signal and to get where you want to go. And the peak hours used to be 1 hour, but now the peaks are stretching out to 2 hours. In the city of Salem, it's worse. Surprisingly, it's worse when school's in session than in summer. On state facilities, it's worse in the summer because of recreational routes. So they have higher traffic volumes during the summer on the state highways. So on the traffic study, we have them analyze their year of opening, or if it's multi-phase, then it's opening year of each phase. And we make them mitigate that if it's necessary. We look at background growth. So how do we, if it's 5 years out, how do we estimate traffic in 5 years? So we take the count that we did today on a weekday, is kind of almost average. And then we use the Mid-Atlantic Valley Council of Governments. They have a transportation model. And we get the background growth, and they give us a rate. They give the developer, the consultant, rate, and they grow their traffic, and they put their traffic on top. and then we make them mitigate. So because a lot of our intersections are already over capacity, we can't make them mitigate back to the 0.9. So the policy is don't make it worse. So if we're operating at a 1.1 and they make it a 1.8, they need to mitigate it back to 1.1. And because we just can't build our way out of congestion. So that's kind of the basics for a TIA. Then the transportation, I think everyone kind of hopefully knows what the transportation planning rule is. If not, it's the rule that DLCD places on everybody that says if you want to change the comprehensive plan designation of a piece of property, you have to address their rules. You have to, and I'm sitting here so long, I kind of blanked out on a lot of things. So,
Not the only one.
yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time, but the transportation planning rule, the basic assessment is that our transportation system is adequate to handle our existing land use designations. So when a developer comes in and they want to change it, usually an upzone, they're making a change, they're going to make it worse. So we have to mitigate not only for the year of opening, but for the transportation planning, our TSP, Transportation System Plan Horizon, which is 20 years out. So again, we use the COG model to get the background growth to grow it. They put their base traffic, what the use was before, their new traffic on top of it, and then we have to mitigate it. So in that scoping part, 50 vehicles in an intersection, when you do that upzoning, we can look at many more intersections because that 50 vehicles travels further. An example, it's like here. That, and here's, it's kind of an odd example, not really odd, but 20 acres of single family residentially zoned property. To develop it, you take out about 25% for roadways. And so you're left with 15 acres, 4,000 square feet per lot, gives us 163 lots. And certainly that would require TIA, and it generates 1,500 ADT. So that's kind of the threshold, we need a TIA. But they want to do the comp plan change, zone change, and they want to change it to multifamily. And it's going to be RM2, which is 31 units per acre. I think that's right, Lisa. And so 31 units per acre is 620 units. The traffic generated from 620 units is 4,178. It's significantly more than 1540. So they're going to have a pretty big impact out in the transportation system. We have a development right now that's similar to that. It was a big single family, they went multifamily. Their mitigation requirements is 2 traffic signals. And one's gonna be built next year and the other one, I hope will be built next year. But they're not getting building permits until the mitigation is done. So that's yay for us and yay for the neighbors. The TPR, Transportation Planning Rule, is kind of lengthy. I actually created a cheat sheet for myself. When you're looking out, there's several ways to do it. You can bring it back to the standard, but most of the intersections are already over the standard. So we use the don't make it worse, which is, you're already over the standard, you make it worse, bring it back to what it was before you made the change. That's the one we use the most. The other one is the trip cap, and you may have heard trip cap, maybe not. But it's a way to say with your existing zoning and comp plan designation, you can generate X number of trips. And they want to change the zoning to allow a certain use that they want to develop there. And rather than do this big, long, protracted analysis and could have potential offsite mitigations, we set a trip cap to what it could have been built before. So from the transportation perspective, you're not adding any additional traffic. If you can, under the old zoning, you can generate 1,000 trips. They're gonna trip cap it to 1,000 trips, and then they put a use on that stays under that 1,000 trips. So we use our trip generation manuals. And let's see, got this session. And take up too much time. This went way longer than I thought. But I'm happy to answer questions and if there are any, you know, I know this wasn't great. Are there any questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a few questions actually. So I work for the state, so I do roadway design and ODOT has like a traffic section and then have roadway section. Does the city have something similar? Because ODOT traffic is signals and signs.
The city's traffic engineering department consists of the city traffic engineer, the assistant city traffic engineer, the traffic signal engineer, and an assistant traffic signal engineer. We have 2 technicians that do our hose counts and do investigations and take care of complaints. And we have 4 electricians that manage our signals. That is the extent of the city's traffic. Yeah, it's minuscule. Megan and I worked at ODOT too, and yes, there's roadway section and signal section, and then there's the region people and the headquarter people. Yep.
And then I had another follow-up question. You know, it's not exclusive of the city, but I feel like a lot of traffic and transportation impact studies really only talk about people that are driving, and they don't necessarily mention that are people walking and biking or taking the bus or whatever from the site. You mentioned the example of 146 apartments. If I'm thinking of like the Riverwood building downtown, I can't imagine all 1,000 of those trips are all going to be people getting in their cars and driving. Some of them are gonna be walking, some of them will be riding bikes, and some will be taking a bus. Is the city able to allow mitigation for those users? If people have concerns about crosswalk safety or bicycling safety or transit service?
So several questions. Riverwood did not do a TIA because it's downtown. They reoccupied the former location of Nordstrom. So in the TIA world that I didn't get into because I wasn't getting into all the details, you get credit for the previous use. So you're not actually adding new trips. So if you were commercial before and you became residential, trips were probably much lower. So there's no TIA required, there's no impact fees. So that's done. I would love if there was some analysis methodologies nationally recognized that we could point to say, oh, this generates so many bicycle trips, this generates so many pedestrian trips. But it's difficult to compare like the city of Salem to the city of Albany to the city of Portland to the, you know, Los Angeles to New York, whatever it is, pick your cities. We are working very hard to make our bike system better. It's not as good as Eugene's, it's not as good as Portland's, but we're working. I heard the other day, Kevin Hopman's the city traffic engineer. He said he was out riding his bike, he's a bicyclist, and there were 3 bicyclists at the same point. And one of them said, oh man, we've hit critical mass. Which is like, you know, for Salem, that was. I mean, it was kind of funny. But yeah, I would love if there was methodology, and then have the ability to tell the consultants, we need you to do it this way. But it's just not there.
So kind of following up on the telling consultants to do it a certain way. You know, as the city works through updating transportation system plan, is there an opportunity when we update the roadway design standards for the city? Is that part of the TSP update? And if that happens, could we adopt kind of better street design standards and those kind of things?
So is your premise that our street design standards are substandard?
No, I'm just
That's what it sounded like.
Well, you know, I look at, I looked at the design standards for a city like Eugene, and they, you know, they include, you know, things like protected bike lanes and they include all these other things. And I looked at the city street design standards, but I didn't see anything kind of that sort.
So, local streets don't have bike lanes.
Yes.
Collector streets, everything collector street and above has a bike lane. It would take a pretty big effort to modify that because that would require changes to perhaps right-of-way widths. Because to add protected bike lanes, you have to add more horizontal space on the roadway. There's a strong desire and need for street trees, and they have to have a certain amount of room to grow. So it would be right-of-way change, it would be new design standards. And then how do we tie those into the existing ones? So it's things going on in my mind. And then that has to be vetted through like the development community, because now we're gonna require additional rights of way. So our standard for minor arterial is 72 feet. And it's 3 lanes with bike lanes and planter strips and sidewalks. If we're going to buffer those bike lanes, so now we're gonna add, what, 3 feet on each side, so we've added 6 more feet, so instead of 72, then it's, do the math on 7, 8. Better than my calculator.
Yeah, I think just my general concern is, you know, as we're updating our streets with developments or new construction or something of that sort, I think it's important that we consider not only users of other modes, but you know, all abilities. From a personal standpoint, I don't feel comfortable, because my partner doesn't feel comfortable riding her bike on the current standard for a collector. You know, it's objective. Or subjective. It's your opinion. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I'd be personally be interested in seeing if that would be something possible.
Yeah, that would, you know, that'd be a discussion probably with our transportation planning manager. Her name's Julie Hanson. Check with her. I don't know if there's a big rush to do that. You know, we have what we have and it's been working for us.
I will note we are beginning the process of updating our transportation system plan, which will be a multi-year process. We'll be looking at all of our transportation policies that are adopted and street designs and whatnot. So early stages of that. Julie is leading that project.
Cool. More questions? Thanks.
I'll just add, I previously asked if the city was going to be revisiting its cross sections. And I was told the answer is yes. And then I said, are those proposals or could come before the planning commission? And she said, I don't know. So we'll work on that. Because I personally believe that our streets are not where they need to be today. Not just in terms of capacity, but in terms of design and cross-section design. So I hope we do have that conversation soon.
So my question would be, what's lacking?
I think
You said that not up to.
yeah, I think this would create a debate that probably we don't need to have right now. But sometime we can go on that here, or 3, and we can talk about, what some of us think are lacking.
Since the hearing's over, and you know, the street up there on Albina.
Nope.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Any other questions?
Yes.
I did just want to note the transportation plan itself does come through planning commission for recommendation when there are amendments, so the planning commission review it, have hearings on it, and then make a recommendation to council who would ultimately adopt it. We're still very early, too early to even determine
the scope of the project, which I think is what Julie talked about when she was here in January. If there's gonna be a committee, and what the committee would be, and then also, because we don't know necessarily how much it's going to cost, we don't know how many cross sections we will be redesigning. Will it just be like every collector street cross section? Will we be looking at specific streets where we know we just want a cross section for that street in the future? So I think that's maybe we're still trying to work that out. And as a reminder, we're doing the scenario planning with Marion County, Kaiser City and Transit, which is the first phase of the TSP, the state requirement that we're doing the scenario planning to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So when we say we started TSP, that first phase is what we're doing, but kind of the traditional updating the plan that we're talking about would be the next phase, which we can't do until the scenario planning is done. So we're trying to get there.
It's an exciting time to be on the planning commission. All right, thank you. Yes, please.
Favorite intersection, least favorite intersection?
I love them all equally. They're like children. You can't pick a favorite.
All right, thanks for the levity. Do we have any subcommittee reports? If not, okay, that gives us to the planning administrator report.
Great. And the reason I asked Tony not to talk about the cases, we do have to take your decision and put it in writing and then mail it out, right? So it's not actually done yet. And we have up to 7 business days to do that. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, but it might take a little bit longer. And until that's done, the decision hasn't actually gone out and we put to writing. Generally, we do ask or advise not to participate, have ex parte communications. We could speak those a little bit, could be remanded back to the planning commission. We did, I know there was mingling, maybe we just did that without my advice. I forgot to say that. Then if it were to come back, we just need to remember those conversations. So that's why it's Tony not to. Why I rudely said no. Sorry, Tony.
Thank you for that.
I did want to let the commission know the planned unit development that you had the hearing on and approved when I was on vacation. I think we said Friday night has been appealed by the applicant over the condition to add sidewalks. So they are going to have a hearing October 14th at City Council. So when that gets scheduled, I'll send out a link if you're interested and want to watch that.
Yeah, at least if I understand, members of the planning commission can testify if they want to, is that correct? Or contribute public comment?
Yeah, you can testify in your own capacity. I mean, don't say you can't go, I'm speaking on behalf of the planning commission. You can go speaking on behalf of Michael Slater, so that's fine.
Who serves on the planning commission? I have witnessed an occasional conversation of what were they thinking? So sometimes good to be there.
I mean, sometimes we've said, you know, think carefully about it, but likely Commissioner Truitt asked about this once too. So we definitely can, and we don't want to tell you can't, but just know that like they'll know that you're part of this planning commission. So.
But if you were testifying about why you voted a certain way on the case, that's not what you're talking about, right? They shouldn't do that.
Right, no, we talk about the approval, you might be explaining or giving the reasons why you voted the way you did, but like you'd be talking about the approval criteria, why you think they're met or not met. I mean, that's probably a fine line between crossover from the other. Try to stay on the correct side of
that. Also, we have another staff presentation scheduled on November 5th. That's on your fly sheet. We're going to have a couple staff here to talk about some FEMA regulations and some updates that are happening to that, or just floodplains and riparian areas generally, because the commission had asked for that. So we have that scheduled. We don't currently have any items for October 1st or October 15th. I think we are going to be bringing amendments to the bylaws. And we talked about that during the summer to change what constitutes quorum, since we had so many vacancies. It doesn't matter now, thank you to the commissioners, but we do want to go ahead and make that change. Also, our bylaws don't say how much time an appellant gets to speak. So I was asking Fred, and so he's gonna look at that, but we probably wanna add that in, at council, there will say that, and it's just don't, but our practice has been to give them 10 minutes. And we might wanna clarify what the rules are to tie in by, so. I guess it's up to the commission if you would want to have a meeting just to go over the bylaws, if we don't have any other scheduling items. So, question, President?
My sense is that we do not need a meeting just to discuss that particular change in the bylaws. Unless there's some strong objection from members of the commission. This is just one item. We're not reviewing them.
Well, I mean, that would be our proposal, I guess. You could ask that would be. Jen, I think it's too late for any items to make that October 1st. Is that less than 20 days?
It's too late.
Yeah. So then potentially cancel that meeting, because we have staff items. Also wanted to let you know that we don't know a date yet, but the city manager has been coming to boards and commissions meetings to talk to commissions about the budget issues. And just feeling like folks that are on boards and commissions that are part of the city through their volunteer work, and so that he wanted to have an opportunity to give a high level overview to every board and commission. He hasn't picked a date yet, so he had asked about the planning commission. So you might see that in an upcoming agenda date. And then I wanted to invite you all, and we'll send it out by email, and then I close my calendar. Plannerpalooza is coming up. It's coming up, that's right. So October is planning month. So there will be proclamation on the next council agenda next Monday, which is in September, to tell everybody that it's planning month. And then we have scheduled Plannerpalooza for October 8th on a Tuesday, starting at 5. It's at 440 Food Hall again. Charles Waters is so nice to host us every year. So in the past, we have planning staff there, we have staff from other jurisdictions and other divisions and departments. So planning commission is invited, counselors, public, neighborhood associations, anybody that submits land use applications, just basically anybody on our email list and social media. And so we have some games and questions and whatnot and prizes, and it's just like a chat with your planner, your local planners about planning stuff if we want to. It's usually really well attended. It's a good time, and we provide food. We don't provide drinks, but there's a bar there, so if you all want to come, let you know. Hopefully we'll see some of you there. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Lisa? No. All right. Any comments for the good of the order? All right, we're adjourned.